To kick us off, let's talk about that winning moment. Just how wild was this win?
Well, it was an incredible performance, wasn't it? From start to finish, the tournament. I mean, from when the first ball was kicked in their opener, right up until the final whistle of the final against Japan. North Korea, yeah, I mean, a very impressive team, and they've done it again. You know, this is the third time they've won the tournament. Should probably say over here in East Asia, for those of us who kind of follow East Asian football, women's football with a keen eye, it's not really much of a surprise. They've always been a powerhouse like this, and it seems that they're backfiring, and yeah, they're really reaping the deserved rewards.
They won all 7 of their matches, smashed Argentina 6-2 in their opener, took down Austria 5-2, and defeated Brazil and the US. Can you talk us through their progress, I guess, throughout the tournament? Did people think from the outset that they were the most likely to win, you know, in comparison to some of the other favourites?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I think, well, my personal opinion is that, and we should kind of mention that they did win the Under-20 Women's Asian Cup earlier this year as well, beating Japan again in the final. So we should kind of, you know, they are on good form. When I saw them and then I had a little look at their group, I thought, okay, they're going to be underdogs, but they could go quite far. And after the first game, I thought, okay, North Korea, they are firing here. They're playing a very kind of intense style of football. They're very used to playing with each other, these players. Again, they won the Asian Cup earlier this year. Yeah, and pretty much just the way that they play and the way that as we got into the knockout stages, how they handled it when they went a goal up and then protected the lead and won against really big teams. Brazil, USA and Japan was their path to the final. It was quite clear that this was a team that were really out to go all the way, and that's exactly what they did.
You touched a little bit on the sort of style of play they went for. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and sort of how that developed through the tournament? And is this consistent across all the kind of North Korean sides, the youth sides that you've seen?
Essentially, yeah. So North Korea, and we can strike a comparison with Japan here. In this part of the world, in East Asia, players that generally have a kind of a less physical stature and a little bit better with agility and this kind of thing, technical skills. So they typically will play like a possession-based football, a lot of passing routines, a lot of kind of really kind of intricate passing maneuvers and some good finishing as well. They focus on this a lot, possession football. And this is how we saw some of these big score lines in the early stages. As they got into the knockout stages against tougher opposition, what I kind of saw them doing was as soon as they would go a goal up, they would then kind of withdraw a little bit, fall back into defensive shape and stay organised and don't do anything unnecessary while they had the lead. And that seemed to really kind of work well for them. They didn't concede a goal again against Brazil, USA and then Japan. Clean sheets in all of those games. So protecting that lead seemed to work really, really well for them. And that's kind of how they managed that as they went through the tournament. Kind of play really with a lot of intensity in the early stages against a manageable opposition. Then when it gets a bit tougher, be a little bit more pragmatic and think things through a little bit. And they did that exceptionally well, yeah.
So it's quite a conservative style of play. Is that something that's sort of ingrained in sort of the other youth sides as well, as a kind of a North Korean style that will be that going forwards, I suppose?
So I would say that it's only conservative style of play when they need to in the game. And yeah, I think we see this from them a lot. They, as I say, they will play a possession-based and really go out to score when the scores are level or they're in a losing position if they're kind of, you know, trailing a little bit. They'll play a lot more positively and a lot more kind of entertainingly there. It's only when they kind of get ahead in the game against tough opposition that we'll see them kind of withdraw back a little bit. And yeah, it seems as though all across the other kind of youth categories, under 70s and even all the way up until to the seniors as well, that's kind of how what they have ingrained from them. So it's a very kind of varied style of play, very different. They can kind of switch between different styles of play throughout the game as the situation might dictate. And yeah, a lot of footballing intelligence and organisation that requires, and that's exactly what we see from them.
Zooming out a little bit and just touching more widely on North Korean football, I know personally I've always wondered how the senior team always seems to be in the top 10 in the world rankings. They always maintain that high position. And of course, with everything going on politically in the country, it's almost a bit of an unknown force, I suppose, football in North Korea. So can you shed a little bit of light on that, on how they've become, I guess, arguably a powerhouse in some respects?
Sure, okay. Well, it's a very kind of very intriguing, very kind of big question as to how they have become so strong and maintained that very respectable ranking in the FIFA rankings. So to begin, a little bit about the youth development and how the players get to be so strong in North Korea. The simplest thing I can say is that an academy, the footballing academies in North Korea more resemble kind of like a military school rather than the academies that we have over in the West and things like that, where football is more kind of like an extracurricular activity, right? Players, there's different levels of commitment from players. Some will go after the schooling activities or on the weekends, this kind of thing. The players that commit to football in North Korea, and we have to remember that this is an authoritarian regime, right? So when people are told what kind of role they're going to have in working for the government, that's what they have to go in and do and commit fully to it. And if that thing is football, then these young players, they will go and commit their time fully, almost on a full-time basis, live in institutions pretty much, these academies are, and be training, honing their skills every single day, building up team cohesion, doing all the physical stuff. And they're probably playing a lot of games against quite tough opposition, senior opposition from young ages as well. So it's very kind of regimented how these players kind of learn from the youth levels. This is how, when they come to these youth tournaments like the Under-20 World Cup, they're way ahead in their developments compared with some of the other nations that they will come up against. And we really see this on the pitch. They're a very kind of complete team, a lot of chemistry, very organized. And a lot of the times it's a little bit too much to handle for some of the teams that they come up against. We talked about some of the results that they managed. So this is how they've actually become so strong, at the youth levels at least. When they get into the senior levels and they go into senior competition, that drops off a little bit, as you kind of alluded to there a little bit. It seems as though that where there's really a high-functioning professional women's league, Spain, the US, even England, the resources that they have available in terms of training, the pay, so players are committing fully now to training and that kind of thing, sports science, that seems to outweigh the North Korean system a little bit, and that's why they don't do as well in these senior competitions and things like that. Touching on the FIFA ranking things just a little bit, it's a very tricky thing to kind of work out these FIFA rankings. I wish they made it a little bit clearer, but typically North Korea, they will always do very well here in East Asia. At the moment, I'd say only Japan at senior level. It's only really Japan that would be able to, I think Japan have beaten them in recent games. Other than that, I think North Korea are capable of beating anyone. So when we're coming into kind of qualifiers, Olympics qualifiers we had recently, and then before that, I don't think they were in the World Cup qualifiers, but we had the Asian Games, which is just an Asian competition that we have here. They did very well, got to the final in that. All these games that they win, and win well by high score lines, all of this counts towards the FIFA ranking, you see. These games are not so significant, I suppose, on the global stage. There's probably not a lot of people watching them, so over in the West, that is, so they go under the radar just a little bit. But this is how they tally up these points for the FIFA rankings. Another thing that's kind of interesting is that with North Korea at the moment unable to play games in North Korea, every game that they play is counted as, I think it's counted as a neutral game or an away game or something like that. And the way that the FIFA rankings work is that if a home game is kind of weighted less than an away game or a game that you play at a neutral venue. So you earn more points on the away if you win an away game than you would a home game. Quite logical, right? So North Korea, every game they're playing is kind of racking up a lot more points than, say, Japan or any other team would earn if they were playing a game at home. So this is how they've been able to kind of very incrementally improve their FIFA ranking and have that placing within the top 10 over the years.
Well, you heard it here first. A bit of a cheat code.
Interesting, yeah.
A little bit of a
little
cheat
loophole,
code,
isn't it?
We will be getting on the phone to Serena after this.
Well, I have a suspicion with North Korea that I don't want to say suspicion. It's kind of what I kind of think they're doing is they put this top 10 placing. They hold it with quite high regard. It's something that if they go back and show this to their people, it's quite an achievement. Look at this. This is the company that we're in the world. We're in the top 10. I think they put a lot of effort into kind of maintaining that. And you see that when they play games against very kind of small, lower ranked nations, Mongolia or something like this, they'll go out and really hammer them. I think we had like a 19-0 in one of the recent games. The scoreline also counts, right? So they put a lot in. Another team would have probably just sent the kids or something like that. North Korea, they think, okay, we can really drum up some points for the FIFA rankings here. Let's go full pelt at these and put them to the sword quite cruelly. And then this will reflect in the FIFA rankings. Yeah.
Interesting one politically, because we look at some countries who will be using, say, sports washing to improve their how they look to the outside world, whereas this almost seems like they're doing it for themselves as a part of an authoritarian regime to say to the people, look how good we are. It's almost more for them than they don't really care about how they seem to the outside world, right?
Precisely right, yeah, Rachel. It's a way of what North Korea typically will do in sport is if there is something that they feel that they can win, that they have a chance of going out and really performing on the world stage, they'll put a lot of resources into it because they can take it back, show it to the people, and present this as kind of like a victory of the government administration, and kind of like whip up national support that way. And women's football has been one that they've been very, very efficient in doing it. So yeah, that's absolutely correct.
I mean, one of the things that we would like to touch on, I think, obviously from a global perspective, North Korea sort of being so well regarded in the FIFA rankings has a lot of respect. But we just wanted to know get a little bit more information from you, I suppose, as to sort of how female athletes in North Korea are treated. Are they sort of treated any differently to male counterparts?
Sure. So I will say that, this kind of information, it's very hard to come by. So I don't have a lot of knowledge on the equality side of things in North Korea, how that kind of compares. But from what I've read and from what research is actually out there, you would think that there is quite a lot of equality. There isn't too much difference of how they would treat a female athlete and a male athlete. For instance, women's football, if we kind of go back to the mid-'80s, which is when women's football really got the push, and the North Korean government really thought that this was an area where they could excel on the global stage, they kind of made it very clear that, we should, and I think at the time it was not the leader we have now, Kim Jong-un, his father, Kim Jong-il, he was the one who kind of said, well, this is going to be a way that we can really show that we're involving all of society, not just 50% of it. Both males and females have this equal role. And we're going to show this through sports and involve them even more and more. And it makes sense that, in football, which would be one of the sports that they would excel at in the women's game, that's what's really going to get the push, and they'll show that on the global stage. But how much this actually has to do with what's going on in society and within every sport itself, and whether equality exists throughout and what it compares to, that's something that remains to be seen. And certainly I don't know too much of that.
I guess the objective is the same, isn't it? It's to use their citizens to show that they're victorious and successful. So I guess from their perspective, it doesn't matter whether it's their male citizens or female citizens doing it. If they're very good at something, it's a way of proving that this system works and their way of life works, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And so whoever is successful and delivers the results, that's the ones who they kind of herald as the heroes of the nation. So I suppose that, gender doesn't really come into that too much.
Something I wanted to pick up on is maybe for our audience's benefit is explaining why they can't play home games. I mean, I'm sure it seems obvious, but it was just interesting what you were saying before we came on air about why they can't play home games.
All right, so this has come from the Asian Football Confederation, the governing body in Asia. It's not quite clear. There's probably a few people on the inside who'll know a lot more than me about this, but it seems that North Korea at the moment isn't meeting certain criteria in what they have to do to host competitive games. This could be to do with how they house and accommodate the visiting teams, how much foreign press they're allowing into the games, this kind of thing. And as a result, the AFC have said that you now have to play all of your games outside of North Korea until this kind of fixes itself. I don't think there's any kind of immediate political instability on the horizon, certainly not like what we're seeing in other parts of the world. I think compared with times in the past for North Korea, that's somewhat stable, if that's not a strange thing to say. But it's more of a footballing thing. They're not playing games there at the moment. That might change in the future, but for now it looks like they're going to have to play some of their games, or all of their games rather. Their home games will be played usually nearby in China or somewhere like that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's arguably a punishment to not be allowed to host games, I suppose, from the federation. But actually it works out perfectly fine for North Korea because they don't have to bring in foreign press, which is good because that's not something they want to do. They don't really want to lift the curtain. And they get extra points for playing all their matches outside it. So actually this kind of enforced, punishment, if you like, actually isn't really much of a punishment.
Absolutely. I mean, and therein lies the frustration that some of the other nations here in the Far East have had in the past years about the FIFA rankings. And it depends how much kind of emphasis you actually put on the FIFA ranking system itself. But that's one way to look at it. If they want to keep football away from the country, or more foreign kind of media coming in and keep that away from the country, then I suppose they're quite happy to do that. And they do have a few friends in the region. They played China, I think, yeah, so China will always let them host the games nearby. I think they recently played 2 friendlies against Russia as well, so old Vladimir over there, he's probably happy to kind of have their girls come in and play a game there. So that could be something that continues. I'm not sure if the AFC will change their mind and then have them play it there, or anything will be done about this kind of this situation with the FIFA rankings. But yeah, I mean, you make a good point. They could be quite comfortable with it the way they are.
We haven't seen much of the senior team at major tournaments like the World Cup, for example. They've kind of fluctuated, I guess, a little bit. What do you think we can expect from them going forward?
So I'll hazard a prediction. I am fairly confident that we'll see them at the next World Cup in Brazil. If, we always have to caveat this with, say if there's some kind of political reason as to why they stop competing and become inactive again. As long as that doesn't happen, and focusing entirely on the pitch and what we saw at the under-20s, I think they're going to be able to get through the Asian qualification without much problems. And then in Brazil in 2027, they will be there. I suppose the question that comes after that is how close are they to really competing with the top nations in women's football, USA, England, Spain, what have you. I still don't think they're quite there yet. It'll be interesting to see how they fare in a game like that against someone really big. But I don't think they'd quite have enough. But I do think they'd be able to kind of get themselves past, that kind of second tier in Europe, finishing second in a World Cup group stage, that kind of thing, and getting out into the knockout stages, go 1 or 2 steps from there. That's about what I think we'd be able to see from them then. The next time that we're going to see them in action, it's quite a while away. We don't have much women's football on the international scene here in Asia for quite some time. It's going to be a little under 2 years from now in Australia with the Women's Asian Cup. They're going to be there, and they probably have a really good chance of winning that as well. They'll probably meet Japan at some point, because those two, they have a recent track record of running into each other in these big tournaments, so that'll be another tasty fixture. But for all intents and purposes, it really seems as though they're back, they're firing. Top 10 in the FIFA rankings is still intact, and it's going to be a team that's going to continue to fascinate us.